Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. I wanted to provide reflections on the disaster cycle. And over the past 2 decades or more that I've worked on the front lines of disaster response and recovery in places like Haiti, Liberia, Panama, and across the US, including leading disaster operations for the Red Cross and International Federation of Red Crescent Societies. I've also had the privilege of training and supporting teams that are working on the disaster cycle. So today, I wanted to provide a reflection on something that's foundational, but far from perfect, which is the disaster cycle. As you've probably seen or read about in the models, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery are all part of this disaster cycle that we often talk about. And it's widely used by governments, non-government organizations, and international agencies. And yes, it offers a structure. In my own field deployments, especially early in my career, I saw the cycle help create clarity in chaos. It gave language and timelines and phrases to really frame disaster operations. But over time, I have noticed a number of limitations, especially in protracted crises, complex urban disasters, or even when working with marginalized communities. So the disaster cycle suggests something that is often thought of as linear, a mechanical process, but disasters rarely unfold that way. I think about in Liberia during the Ebola crisis, recovery and response blurred every single day. In Haiti, years after the earthquake of 2011, we were still grappling with the structural mitigation issues that predated the event, as well as geopolitical context. And I realized that the cycle, while useful, can often become a trap. It leads to linear thinking and rigid programming, short-term funding, and really siloed mandates by organizations. I also found that it doesn't account for the social, political, and ecological forces that often shape our risk analyses. And what I wanted to share with you for this week is kind of thinking about these larger questions. Who defines when one phase ends and one begins? How does this framing affect the decisions that our stakeholders make? And what would it look like to have a more flexible or adaptable model of disaster management? There are, of course, alternatives and really models that emphasize systems thinking, resilience, and local knowledge. And in recent years, especially since the Grand Bargain Agreement of 2016, we've thought about ways that leaders across sectors are deploying to redesign approaches that really prioritize anticipatory action and community-led planning. So these conversations aren't just theoretical, they're changing how we fund. As funder communities look at ways to change the model, how we measure impact, and importantly, how we lead in disaster organizations. So all of you are part of, hopefully, this next generation of leaders who can change the status quo, who can work within the system and really push it to evolve. So as you reflect upon this week, I just encourage you to take little nuggets of my lived experience and really this concept that disaster cycle is a tool and not a truth. From my own experience, I can tell you that leadership in disaster settings isn't about following the model. It's about knowing when to depart from it and having that flexibility. So keep asking hard questions, keep looking at the big picture, and keep grounding your insights in the real lived experience of communities, challenging power dynamics that surround every disaster, and looking forward to additional reflections with you in future modules.